Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into a muddy medieval village at dawn, where smoke from last night's hearth still clings to the air and a church bell thuds somewhere beyond the fog. Not ringing for drama, just marking time the only way anyone really knows how. You're born into this world without fanfare, without a clock on the wall, without anyone promising you a long life. And honestly, here's the fun part. You probably won't survive this. That's not me being edgy. That's just medieval math doing its thing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Somewhere out there, another listener is drifting off with you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter life already negotiating with fate. Birth itself is the first gamble, and it's a rough one. In many medieval communities, a significant number of babies don't make it past their first year, and that single fact drags the average life expectancy way down before you've even learned to focus your eyes. This is the mainstream historical truth hiding behind those often quoted numbers about people only living to 30. You're not expected to keel over at 30 like a phone battery hitting zero. It's just that so many lives end before they really begin that the average never gets a fair chance to climb. You're swaddled tightly because everyone believes firm wrapping helps your limbs grow straight, and also because a baby that can't wriggle is a baby less likely to roll into danger. Your mother is exhausted, your father nervous in a quiet, practical way, and somewhere nearby a midwife mutters prayers that blend Christian saints with older, half-forgotten charms. Historians still argue whether these folk rituals actually improved survival through hygiene and routine, or whether they simply gave adults the illusion of control in a world that offered very little. The room smells of straw, sweat, and smoke. This is normal. Cleanliness exists, but it's nothing like the modern obsession. Water has to be hauled, heated, and reused, so no one is wasting it on unnecessary scrubbing. A quirky tidbit you might enjoy before drifting off. Some medieval households believed that bathing infants too often could wash away their strength, so you're not exactly getting daily spa treatment. Relax, your immune system is about to get very independent very fast. From the moment you draw breath, your life expectancy is already being silently calculated by forces no one can see. Seasons matter. If you're born in a year following a good harvest, your odds improve. If famine looms, the numbers tilt against you. Grain stores, weather patterns, even the local lord's tax demands all shape how long you might reasonably expect to exist. This is life expectancy not as a number, but as a fragile agreement between humans and nature, renegotiated every year. There's no concept of childhood as a protected bubble yet. If you survive infancy, congratulations, you've cleared the most dangerous hurdle, though nobody throws you a party for it. You're just quietly folded into the rhythm of life, expected to grow, help, and endure. A light joke for you here. There's no baby-proofing the house, because honestly, the house itself is the hazard. Open fires, sharp tools, wandering animals. It's like a medieval obstacle course, but without the waiver forms. Religion hovers over everything, especially death. When infants die, which happens often enough to feel tragically routine, They're explained as God's will, or as souls too pure for the world. This belief doesn't erase grief, but it does give it a frame, a narrative that makes unbearable loss slightly more survivable. Historians still argue whether this religious framing truly comforted parents, or whether it simply masked trauma that had no space to be openly processed. You, meanwhile, are blissfully unaware. Your days are light and dark, hunger and warmth, sound and silence. Bells mark hours, but they're not precise. Time feels elastic, stretching and compressing around tasks rather than ticking away. Life expectancy, from your perspective, doesn't exist as a concept. There is only now and next feeding, and the vague hope that tomorrow resembles today. A mainstream fact worth settling into gently. If you make it to around age 10, your chances of living into your 40s or 50s rise dramatically. That's the statistical magic trick of medieval demographics. Survive early vulnerability, and your body proves itself surprisingly resilient. This is where modern people often misread the past, imagining a world where nobody grows old. Old age exists here, it's just rarer, more selective, like a club with a very strict door policy. Another quirky belief floats through your early years. Some parents delay naming a child until survival feels more certain. A quiet superstition mixed with emotional self-defense. Why name what might vanish? It's heartbreaking and practical at the same time, a duality medieval life specializes in. As you lie there, maybe drifting, maybe fussing, your future is undefined. You could become a farmer bent by decades of work, a craftsperson with strong hands and aching joints, or a casualty of disease before you ever learn your letters. Life expectancy, for you, isn't a promise. It's a probability cloud, constantly reshaped by forces far beyond your control. And yet, there is warmth. Someone hums. A fire crackles. Despite everything, people love, hope, and plan in small ways. They plant trees they may never sit beneath. They teach skills meant to last longer than they do. That quiet optimism is the real engine of medieval survival, and it hums softly beneath the statistics. So you begin here, fragile but alive, already beating the odds simply by breathing through the night. The math is harsh, yes, but for now you're still in the game, and the centuries ahead of you are ready to test exactly how long you can stay. You grow a little, and something quietly strange becomes clear. No one is counting your years the way you're used to now. There's no birthday cake, no candles betraying your age, no neat number pinned to your identity. Time exists, absolutely. It rings from the church tower and creeps across the fields. But age is slippery, remembered more by memory than mathematics. You are born the year of the hard frost or just after the old lord died. And that's usually precise enough. This is one of those mainstream historical facts that feels odd today. Most medieval people do not know their exact age, and they rarely need to. You measure your life by milestones instead. The year you stop being carried. The season you first help in the fields. The winter when the river freezes solid and everyone talks about it for decades afterward. If someone asks how old you are, you shrug, estimate, or look to an older relative who squints at you like a human calendar. It's not ignorance, it's priority management. When survival takes most of your energy, counting exact years doesn't make the cut. Life expectancy, then, isn't a personal countdown ticking above your head. It's a communal sense of how long people usually last. Vaguely that some die young, some make it to gray hair, and that either outcome feels normal enough not to provoke existential panic. A light joke drifts in here. Midlife crisis is hard to schedule when you're not sure what midlife technically is. The church does keep records. Baptisms, marriages, burials, but even these aren't airtight. Names repeat, spellings shift, and dates blur. A quirky tidbit to enjoy as you settle deeper into this era. Some medieval scribes reuse parchment by scraping off old writing, so even official records literally overwrite the past. If that doesn't feel symbolic enough for you, nothing will. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced time as more cyclical than linear, shaped by seasons and religious calendars rather than numerical progression. From your perspective, that argument feels academic. You just know that spring means planting, autumn means harvest, and winter means huddling close to the fire and hoping your stored food lasts. Years loop, rituals repeat, and your body changes so gradually that aging feels less like a slope and more like a series of small steps. This loose relationship with age has real consequences for how life expectancy is understood. When modern scholars calculate medieval lifespans, they're often working backward from patchy data, averaging lives that were never meant to be averaged. You don't feel like a statistic. You feel like a person embedded in a rhythm. The idea that people only live to 30 would sound ridiculous to you if anyone bothered to phrase it that way. Work marks time more clearly than numbers ever could. When you're old enough to contribute, that moment becomes a turning point everyone remembers. Since you started helping with the sheep replaces, since you turned 8. Your hands toughen, your posture changes, and your sense of self adjusts accordingly. Aging is functional here, about what you can do, not how many years you've logged. There's a mainstream truth humming beneath this. Medieval society values roles over ages. Childhood ends when usefulness begins, adulthood deepens with responsibility, and old age arrives when your body can no longer keep up. That transition point varies wildly between individuals, which is why age feels fuzzy. Someone at 40 who's worn down by labor may seem ancient, while another at 60 with lighter duties appears remarkably spry. A small, sleepy joke slips in. Retirement planning is easy when retirement isn't a thing. You just slow down if you're lucky. Calendars exist, of course. Monks track feast days with impressive precision, and scholars argue endlessly about dates. But this knowledge doesn't trickle down evenly. You know when Easter arrives, not because it's April 12th or 18th, but because the village changes its behavior. Bells ring differently, food shifts, and routines soften. Time is social before it is numerical. This shapes how death is perceived, too. When someone dies, people remember how she lived through 3 bad plagues. He saw 5 kings. Rather than how long. Longevity is qualitative. To live long is to have witnessed much, not to have accumulated a certain number of years. Historians still argue whether this event-based memory made loss easier to bear or simply reframed it in ways modern minds struggle to interpret. You notice elders sometimes exaggerate their age, sometimes underestimate it, sometimes honestly don't know. It doesn't matter. Respect comes from experience, not arithmetic. An old man's authority rests in the fact that he remembers when the river changed course, not that he's 72. There's also a subtle emotional armor built into this vagueness. When age isn't exact, death doesn't feel like a timer running out. It feels sudden or timely or mysterious, but rarely too early in the modern sense. This may be one reason medieval people appear, from a distance, oddly calm about mortality. The clock is quieter here. A quirky belief surfaces in some regions. Certain birthdays are considered dangerous, though nobody agrees which ones. Turning 7, 12, or 21 might invite misfortune depending on who you ask. It's less about age itself and more about transition. Change is risky, and superstition rushes in to pad the uncertainty. As you move forward, your sense of self isn't anchored to a number. You are defined by what you remember, what you endure, and what you contribute. Life expectancy exists all around you, shaping expectations quietly, but it never taps you on the shoulder to announce itself. You simply live, season by season, task by task, unaware that centuries later people will argue over spreadsheets trying to explain your existence. For now, you just know that you're still here, time flowing in a soft loop around you, and that feels like enough. You're sturdier now, moving with a confidence that surprises the adults around you. Childhood, in the medieval sense, is a narrow bridge, and you're already halfway across it. Surviving your early years places you in a quieter statistical category. One historians point to when they remind everyone that making it past about age 5 or 7 dramatically improves your odds of reaching adulthood. This is the mainstream fact humming beneath your everyday life. The danger curve drops as you grow, even if nobody ever explains it that way. Your days are busy. You chase animals, haul water, gather firewood, and learn through imitation rather than instruction. Formal schooling is rare unless you're destined for the church or a wealthy household, but practical education is constant. Every task teaches your body how to endure. Your immune system, seasoned by constant exposure, toughens up fast. A slightly cheeky aside, you're basically running on Natural Selection OS, version medieval, with no option to uninstall. Childhood illness still lurks. Fevers come and go, sometimes taking playmates with them. There's no quarantine protocol, no pediatric wing, just watchful adults and whispered prayers. A quirky tidbit worth tucking under the blanket. In some regions, children were small amulets, animal teeth, carved saints, bits of ribbon, believed to ward off sickness. Whether these charms helped psychologically or just jingled reassuringly, historians still argue whether belief itself offered measurable survival benefits through reduced stress. You're also eating more now, and food quality matters. Bread, porridge, occasional vegetables, maybe milk or cheese if fortune smiles. Meat is rare for most, but not mythical. The calories you get are enough to keep you moving, not enough to pad reserves. When harvests fail, children feel it first. Growth slows, bellies ache. Life expectancy thins quietly at the edges during these lean times. There's a strange blend of tenderness and toughness in how adults treat you. They love you deeply, but they also expect resilience early. This isn't cruelty. It's adaptation. A child who can't contribute even in small ways strains a household already balanced on the edge. You sense this without ever having it explained. It nudges you toward independence faster than any modern childhood would allow. Play exists surprisingly. Games with stones, sticks, songs, chasing through fields. Laughter survives, even thrives. A light joke floats in. You don't need toys when the entire village is an open-world sandbox. Just try not to fall in anything on fire. Historians still argue whether medieval children experienced happiness differently or simply expressed it under harsher conditions. From inside the moment, joy feels real enough. You laugh hard, cry briefly, and move on. Emotional processing happens on the move, not in quiet reflection. Around you, adults watch closely for signs that you'll make it. Reaching age 10 is an unspoken milestone. No ceremony marks it, but something shifts. You're trusted with more responsibility. You're less fragile in the collective imagination. Life expectancy, though never named, stretches a little further ahead in everyone's mind. Disease remains the wild card. You don't know about bacteria, but you know patterns. Certain coughs are bad. Certain rashes mean trouble. People notice that some children survive outbreaks better than others. A mainstream truth emerges through observation. Prior illness often seems to grant protection. Without understanding immunity, communities still recognize its effects. There's also a darker edge. Discipline can be harsh. Physical punishment isn't unusual, partly because survival leaves little room for negotiation. You learn quickly what's allowed. The upside, if we can call it that, is clarity. Rules are simple. Consequences immediate. There's something almost calming about that structure. Quirky beliefs pepper your days. Some think children grow better if they sleep facing east. Others insist cutting hair too early weakens the spirit. You don't question these things. They're just part of the background hum of living. Historians still argue whether such customs indirectly influenced health, sleep patterns, hygiene habits, or whether they're just cultural noise layered over biology. As you edge toward adolescence, you're no longer seen as a life constantly at risk, but as a life with momentum. You've survived enough winters to earn cautious optimism. Your body carries scars, maybe from small accidents or illnesses, but each one is proof of endurance. Life expectancy at this point becomes less about whether you'll live at all and more about what kind of life you'll manage to carve out. The road ahead is still dangerous, but it's no longer a free fall. You're walking it now, barefoot, alert, and, against the odds, still very much here. You eat what the year gives you, and the year is not always generous. Food is the quiet architect of medieval life expectancy, shaping bodies slowly, invisibly, the way water shapes stone. Most days, your meals are simple. Bread dense enough to feel like a commitment, porridge that steams in the cold air, vegetables pulled from the earth with dirt still clinging to them. This is the mainstream reality. Calories are just sufficient in good years, and painfully scarce in bad ones. Hunger isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a background sensation, a low hum in your stomach that never quite shuts off. You grow used to it. Everyone does. A light joke sneaks in here. Snacking isn't a concept, because there's nothing to snack on. You eat when food appears and you stop when it's gone. Famine is the real threat, the kind that reshapes demographics without announcing itself. A failed harvest doesn't just mean one bad year. It weakens bodies, making disease more lethal and childbirth riskier long after the fields recover. Historians still argue whether medieval famines killed more people directly through starvation or indirectly by lowering resistance to illness. From your vantage point, the distinction is academic. You just know who doesn't come back next spring. Protein is precious. Meat shows up rarely unless you're wealthy or lucky. Fish fills the gap near rivers and coasts, especially on religious fast days, which ironically sometimes improve nutrition by diversifying diets. A quirky tidbit worth savoring. Medieval beer, brewed weak and safer than water, provides extra calories and is drunk by adults and children alike. It's not a party, it's survival hydration. Seasonality governs everything. Autumn is abundance, winter restraint. You feel strongest after harvest, weakest by late winter when stores thin out. Life expectancy stretches and contracts with the calendar. Children conceived during hard years are smaller, frailier, something people notice even if they don't chart it. There's skill involved in survival. Women and men know how to stretch food, adding fillers, mixing grains, fermenting, drying. Waste is rare. Even scraps find purpose. This efficiency keeps more people alive than raw numbers suggest. It's one reason medieval populations persist despite relentless pressure. Religion weaves into diet, too. Fast days limit meat but not calories. Lent shifts consumption patterns in ways that sometimes improve health, sometimes worsen it. Historians still argue whether religious fasting was a net benefit or burden on medieval bodies. You just follow the rules, eat what's allowed, and move on. Social class intrudes sharply here. Nobles eat better, more meat, more variety, but sometimes too well. Gout, obesity, and related illnesses shorten elite lives in ways peasants rarely experience. A sleepy chuckle. Turns out overindulgence has always been bad for you. It just used to come with nicer tableware. Children feel food stress first, elders last. The strongest workers get priority in lean times, not out of cruelty but necessity. This triage quietly shapes life expectancy curves. You notice who gets an extra scoop, and you understand why, even if it stings. A fringe belief drifts through some regions. Certain foods are hot or cold in nature, tied to humoral theory. You're fed accordingly, warming foods in winter, cooling ones in summer. While the science is off, some practices accidentally align with nutritional needs. Historians still argue how much humoral medicine helped versus hindered survival. As years pass, your body records every good harvest and every lean one. Height, strength, resilience, all quietly shaped by calories you never counted. Life expectancy here isn't just about disease or danger. It's about whether your body had enough, often enough, to keep repairing itself. You don't think in terms of nutrition. You think in terms of fullness, warmth, and energy. But centuries later, scholars will point to your diet as one of the strongest predictors of how long you might live. For now, you just eat, hope the fields cooperate, and trust that tomorrow brings bread. You get sick eventually. Everyone does. In the Middle Ages, illness isn't an interruption to life. It's woven into it, an expected visitor that sometimes overstays its welcome. Without germ theory, you don't know what causes disease, but you recognize patterns well enough to fear them. Certain seasons bring fevers. Certain smells mean danger. This is the mainstream reality shaping life expectancy. Disease is the leading cause of death across all ages, not because people are foolish, but because knowledge hasn't caught up yet. When sickness hits, treatment is a blend of prayer, observation, and tradition. A local healer might bleed you, apply poultices, or prescribe herbs based on humoral theory, the belief that health depends on balancing bodily fluids. A quirky tidbit to tuck away: crocodile dung appears in some medical recipes, though thankfully more is theory than widespread practice. Remember that for later. It makes a great callback when you're trying to fall asleep and wondering how far medicine has come. Doctors exist, but they're rare and expensive. Most care happens at home, guided by elders who've seen similar illnesses before. You're wrapped in blankets, fed what you can tolerate, and watched closely. Sometimes you recover, sometimes you don't. Historians still argue whether medieval medical interventions helped more than they harmed, or whether the real gains came from nursing, rest, and basic hygiene rather than the treatments themselves. Plagues aside, those are coming later. Everyday infections quietly trim lifespans. Cuts can fester. Tooth infections turn serious. Childbirth-related illness threatens women regularly. Without antibiotics, even small problems can escalate. And yet, not everyone drops dead at the first sniffle. Bodies adapt. Some people seem remarkably resistant, and no one knows why. There's a strong spiritual layer to illness. Sickness is often interpreted as a test, a punishment, or a mystery best handled through faith. Pilgrimages to healing shrines are common. Saints specialize: one for eyes, another for throats, another for skin. A light joke drifts in. It's like an early, very divine version of medical specialization minus the paperwork. Communities respond collectively. When illness spreads, people adjust behavior instinctively, avoiding certain houses, burning herbs, opening windows. They don't know about pathogens, but they know correlation. This folk epidemiology saves lives in ways no one documents at the time. A mainstream fact worth settling into: surviving one disease often protects you from it later. Measles, for example, hits once if you survive it. This contributes to why adults sometimes fare better than children in outbreaks. Historians still argue how much this natural immunity shapes medieval population stability over centuries. Quirky remedies abound: garlic for protection, onions under the bed, charms stitched into clothing. While many do nothing biologically, they offer comfort, and comfort keeps people calmer, more compliant with rest. That psychological angle matters more than it gets credit for. You notice that illness changes social roles. The sick slow down, others pick up slack. Care is labor-intensive, especially in poor households, and this cost factors silently into life expectancy. A family stretched thin by repeated illness becomes vulnerable to everything else. Despite everything, there's resilience here. People expect sickness and plan loosely for it. Food is saved. Neighbors help. Children learn early that bodies fail sometimes, and that survival is partly endurance, partly luck. You recover more often than not, and each recovery feels like a small victory, uncelebrated but real. Life expectancy inches forward not through medical breakthroughs, but through sheer persistence. As you drift into sleep tonight, remember this: medieval life isn't short because people lack will to live. It's short because the margins are thin, and disease loves thin margins. Still, against those odds, you're breathing, and tomorrow's bell will ring again. You work. Not later, not someday, now. Labor arrives early in your life, and it never really leaves. In the Middle Ages, work is not a phase. It's a condition, and it shapes life expectancy as surely as disease or hunger. By your early teens, you're already doing tasks that modern bodies wouldn't touch without safety gear and a union rep. This is the mainstream fact beneath the rhythm of your days. Physical labor ages you faster, even if it also keeps you strong. Your body adapts in practical ways. Muscles harden, hands thicken. Your spine learns to carry loads it was never designed for. There's no concept of ergonomics, just repetition. Over time, joints ache, backs curve, and injuries accumulate. A light joke drifts in: your posture never stood a chance, and neither did your chiropractor, because that profession won't exist for centuries. Work varies by role. Farming is relentless, tied to seasons that don't care about your fatigue. Craft work, smithing, weaving, carpentry, demands precision and exposes you to smoke, fumes, and repetitive strain. Apprenticeships offer structure and a path upward, but they still grind bodies down. Life expectancy shortens quietly under this wear, not with drama, but with stiffness and pain. Accidents are common. Tools slip, animals kick, loads fall. Without modern trauma care, injuries that would be manageable today can end lives or permanently limit function. Historians still argue how many medieval deaths attributed to natural causes actually began as workplace accidents that spiraled. Yet, work also protects in odd ways. Constant movement builds cardiovascular strength. Regular routines regulate sleep. Physical activity offsets some dietary shortcomings. This paradox fascinates historians. Labor both sustains life and slowly consumes it. A quirky tidbit: some medieval workers believe certain saints protect specific trades: blacksmiths, masons, sailors, leading to rituals before dangerous tasks. Whether this superstition reduces accidents by encouraging focus or just adds ceremony, historians still debate. There's little concept of rest days outside religious holidays. Feast days offer pauses, but they're not for recovery. They're for celebration. You work through pain because there's no alternative. Slowing down too much risks hunger, which is worse. Social class alters this equation. Nobles avoid hard labor but suffer other health issues from inactivity and excess. Clergy often live longer, benefiting from steadier food and lighter physical demands. This creates a curious curve in life expectancy, where moderate labor sometimes proves healthier than either extreme. You notice elders moving carefully, favoring one side, hands twisted by years of strain. Old age here isn't marked by wrinkles. It's marked by how you rise from the ground. When someone can no longer work, their value shifts to knowledge, childcare, or simply presence. Support varies. Families help when they can. Communities sometimes don't. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced chronic pain differently, whether constant exposure normalized it, or whether sources simply underreport suffering. From your perspective, pain is just another weather pattern. Unpleasant, persistent, and rarely discussed. Despite the toll, there's pride in work. Skill matters. Competence earns respect. This sense of purpose sustains many through hardship and may even extend life by anchoring mental health. A sleepy aside, turns out feeling useful has always been good for you. As years pass, your body carries the ledger of every task performed. Life expectancy isn't just about how long you live, but how long you can function. The two diverge gradually, quietly. You end each day tired, sometimes sore, sometimes satisfied. Tomorrow will ask the same of you, and you'll answer because that's how life continues here, one work day at a time. You live with danger the way you live with weather, aware of it, adjusting to it, rarely dramatizing it unless it strikes close. Violence in the Middle Ages isn't constant chaos, but it's never far away either, and it presses down on life expectancy in sudden, uneven ways. This is the mainstream truth beneath the stories. Most medieval people don't die in epic battles, but the constant presence of conflict, weapons, and instability raises the odds of an abrupt ending. War rolls through regions like a bad season. Armies march, forage, and leave little behind. Even if you never lift a weapon, you feel war's effects. Lost crops, stolen animals, displaced neighbors. A single campaign can undo years of careful survival planning. Historians still argue whether indirect war deaths from famine and disease outweigh those from actual fighting, but from your perspective, war always over-delivers on misery. Violence also hides in smaller moments. Feuds flare. Drunken arguments turn physical. Law enforcement is local, uneven, and sometimes brutal. Justice can be swift or non-existent. A light joke slips in. Conflict resolution workshops have not yet entered the chat. Weapons are everywhere. Knives are tools first, weapons second, but the line blurs easily. Even everyday accidents, falls from ladders, kicks from horses, can be fatal without proper care. Life expectancy shrinks not through constant bloodshed, but through the ever-present possibility of it. Young men face particular risk. If you're male and able-bodied, you're more likely to be drawn into fighting, whether as a soldier, a guard, or simply someone expected to defend property. Survival here depends as much on luck as skill. Many who live long lives do so by avoiding heroics. A quirky tidbit: some medieval towns limit weapon carrying within walls to reduce violence, an early form of public safety regulation. Enforcement varies wildly, but the idea itself shows an awareness that too many blades shorten lives. Women experience violence differently. Less battlefield risk, more domestic vulnerability. Sources hint at abuse without naming it clearly. Historians still argue how widespread interpersonal violence truly was versus how much went unrecorded. Silence here is not absence. Religion again frames danger. Dying in battle may promise spiritual reward. Martyrdom has cultural currency. This belief doesn't remove fear, but it alters how risk is weighed. Some step into danger believing meaning outweighs longevity. Despite this, most days are peaceful. You farm, trade, laugh, sleep. That's the quiet paradox. A world capable of sudden violence is also mostly calm. Life expectancy statistics flatten these extremes into averages, hiding the lived texture of long stretches of normalcy punctuated by rare catastrophe. You learn caution. Routes are chosen carefully. Strangers are assessed quickly. Children are warned where not to wander. This constant low-level vigilance becomes second nature. Costs mental energy, but it also keeps you alive. As you lie down at night, danger recedes slightly, like a shadow at the edge of firelight. You know tomorrow could bring trouble, but tonight is quiet. And in this world, quiet nights are how people reach old age, one avoided disaster at a time. If you're born female, life expectancy takes on a different shape, bending sharply around childbirth. Even if you're not, you grow up watching it shape the lives of mothers, sisters, and neighbors with quiet intensity. Pregnancy is common, expected, and dangerous in equal measure. This is the mainstream historical fact threading through medieval demographics. Childbirth is one of the leading causes of death for women, and it shadows their entire adult lives. You marry young by modern standards, often in your teens because fertility is precious and time feels uncertain. Pregnancy follows quickly. There's no reliable contraception, and large families are both practical and hopeful. Some children won't survive, and no one says that out loud, but everyone plans around it. Life expectancy calculations for women dip here, not from weakness, but from repeated biological risk. Birth happens at home, guided by experienced women rather than physicians. Midwives know their craft through observation and tradition. They recognize dangerous signs even if they can't always fix them. A quirky tidbit worth remembering. Certain charms and whispered prayers are believed to ease labor, sometimes stitched directly into birthing clothes. Whether they help physically or simply steady nerves, historians still argue. Infections are the real enemy. Without antiseptics, even successful births can turn fatal days later. This invisible danger trims years from countless lives. Yet many women survive multiple births and live long lives, their bodies adapting remarkably well. Survivorship bias runs strong here. The women you see around you are the ones who made it through. Men often underestimate this risk, not from cruelty but from distance. They don't see the full process, and death in childbirth is both feared and normalized. Religion frames it as noble suffering, which offers meaning but not safety. A light joke, gently placed. The phrase "bundle of joy" has not yet been workshopped by medieval marketing teams. Class matters again. Wealthy women have better food and more rest, but also higher expectations for frequent pregnancies. Poor women work longer into pregnancy and return to labor sooner after birth. These factors pull life expectancy in different directions, and historians still argue which group ultimately fares better. Children sense the tension. You grow up knowing that birth can bring celebration or mourning. This awareness matures you early. Life feels provisional, especially for women, whose bodies become both life-givers and risk-bearers. Despite everything, bonds form. Women support each other fiercely during births. Knowledge is shared quietly, passed down through hands and whispered instructions. This collective care saves lives in ways official records never capture. If you survive these years, your chances improve. Once childbearing ends, life expectancy rises again. Many women who make it through their reproductive years live into old age, becoming anchors of families and keepers of memory. So you move through this stage with courage that rarely gets named. Life expectancy narrows, widens, narrows again, shaped by biology, culture, and luck. And each surviving mother quietly defies the odds, adding another season to her story. You start to notice something uncomfortable but undeniable. Not everyone ages at the same speed. Life expectancy in the Middle Ages isn't just about disease or luck. It's about where you stand in the social ladder and how hard gravity presses down on you from above. This is the mainstream historical fact that quietly shapes every generation. Class divides lifespan as much as any plague ever could. If you're born a peasant, your life is physically demanding, nutritionally thin, and tightly bound to land you don't own. You work hard, eat simply, and face constant exposure to weather and injury. Yet you also benefit from fresh air, regular movement, and fewer indulgences. Many peasants who survive childhood and avoid major catastrophe live into their 50s or beyond, bodies worn but resilient. If you're born noble, your risks shift. You eat richer food, rest more, and avoid backbreaking labor, but excess becomes its own problem. Diets heavy in meat, sugar, and alcohol bring ailments like gout and heart issues. You're also entangled in politics and warfare, which can end lives abruptly. A light joke floats by. Turns out, living like royalty has always been a mixed bag for your health. Clergy occupy a curious middle ground. Monks and priests often live longer than both peasants and nobles. They eat regularly, avoid extreme labor, and benefit from communal care when ill. Celibacy reduces childbirth-related mortality, and literacy improves access to medical knowledge. Historians still argue whether spiritual discipline itself improved health outcomes, or whether it was simply the stable lifestyle doing the heavy lifting. Wealth buys buffers, better food during famines, warmer clothing, cleaner living spaces, but it also buys exposure to court intrigue, stress, and sedentary habits. Life expectancy curves for elites spike and dip unpredictably, while peasant curves slope more steadily downward. You notice how children of different classes grow differently. Noble children are softer, paler, more sheltered. Peasant children are smaller but tougher. Both have vulnerabilities. Survival is never guaranteed, just differently negotiated. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some nobles believe wearing jewels protects against illness, particularly plague. These plague rings are more about signaling wealth than stopping disease, but they look impressive while failing medically. Fashion has always been dangerous. Justice, too, divides life expectancy. Punishments are harsher for the poor, leniency more common for the powerful. Accidents that kill peasants might be inconveniences for nobles. This imbalance quietly trims years from the lower classes. Yet class boundaries blur in unexpected ways. Skilled artisans can outlive nobles. Wise midwives gain protection through usefulness. Reputation sometimes matters more than birth. Medieval society is rigid but not immovable. Historians still argue how mobile medieval society truly was, whether exceptional individuals distort our view, or whether quiet movement between classes was more common than records suggest. From your position inside it, movement feels possible but risky. You internalize these differences without naming them. You know who eats better, who rests more, who fears what. Life expectancy becomes a background expectation shaped by privilege and pressure. As night settles, class doesn't vanish, but it softens. Everyone sleeps. Everyone is vulnerable. Death doesn't check titles at the door, though it does seem to arrive sooner for some than others. You drift off understanding this much. In the Middle Ages, how long you live depends not just on how strong you are, but on how cushioned your life happens to be. And cushions, like everything else, are unevenly distributed. You leave the fields behind and step into the city, and immediately life feels different. Closer, louder, and, paradoxically, more dangerous. Cities in the Middle Ages are bustling nodes of trade, noise, and disease, and living here alters life expectancy in ways you start noticing almost immediately. This is a mainstream fact. Urban living concentrates both opportunity and risk, compressing human experience like a pressure cooker. Streets are narrow and often filthy. Animals wander freely, carts rumble, and waste is dumped wherever convenient. You dodge a pig while carrying water and wonder why your lungs ache from smoke and dust. Hygiene isn't absent, it's just not efficient. Wells and public baths exist, but overcrowding and poor sanitation make disease a constant companion. You quickly learn that open sewers, crowded markets, and stagnant pools shorten lives, even if the city offers food, trade, and shelter. A quirky observation: some towns employ gong farmers to clean cesspits at night, invisible heroes of urban sanitation. Their job is nasty, dangerous, and oddly essential. Historians still argue how much these laborers actually prevented outbreaks versus simply delaying them. Either way, you respect their work from a distance and try not to think about it too long before dinner. Disease moves faster in towns. Measles, smallpox, typhoid, they circulate like an invisible river, touching new bodies daily. Life expectancy drops, especially for children. Yet cities offer trade and wealth that villages can't match. So survival is a complex negotiation between risk and reward. Crowds change social behavior. You learn to gauge strangers quickly, who seems healthy, who sneezes too much, who lingers near unclean water. A light joke drifts in. City smog is basically medieval air conditioning, except it wants to kill you quietly. Observational skills here are survival skills. Rural life has its own dangers: famine, hard labor, wild animals. But city risks are immediate, concentrated, and unpredictable. You might survive childhood in a village only to find that your lungs and stomach can't handle city conditions for long. Class overlays this as well. Merchants and wealthier residents can shield themselves better, but artisans, laborers, and servants are exposed continuously. Religion permeates urban life differently, too. Churches and monasteries offer charity, food, and occasional medical care. Shrines for plague saints become focal points during outbreaks. You notice how people move in groups, following rituals designed both for spiritual comfort and practical hygiene. Historians still argue how much ritual actually limited infection versus simply providing psychological relief. Nutrition also shifts. Urban diets can be richer and more varied, thanks to markets and trade, but freshness is unpredictable. Grain stores can run low, salted fish lasts, but it's not exactly gourmet. You learn to appreciate every loaf you can secure, because scarcity comes fast in tightly packed streets. Despite hazards, city life has vitality. Festivals, markets, music, and community events pulse through the streets, reminding you that human experience isn't just survival. It's also engagement, curiosity, and celebration. Even under the looming shadow of disease, people live, laugh, and plan. You realize the countryside and the city are mirrors and opposites. One offers space and labor, the other proximity and opportunity. Both sculpt life expectancy differently, but both teach you the same lesson. Adaptation is essential, and flexibility often determines survival. As night falls over the rooftops, smoke curling from chimneys, you feel the tension of urban living settle slightly. You are weary but alive. In this city, as in the country, life is precarious, beautiful, and stubbornly persistent. You wake to the rhythmic toll of bells, reminding you that life and death are neighbors here, intimately intertwined. Faith shapes perception of mortality in ways you barely notice at first, yet they quietly influence how life expectancy feels. In the Middle Ages, religion isn't just decoration. It's the lens through which people interpret every illness, every accident, every passing year. This is a mainstream truth. Mortality is framed by belief as much as biology. Death is inevitable, yes, but also meaningful. You see it in church rituals, in prayers, in sermons describing the afterlife in vivid, sometimes terrifying terms. Saints, angels, demons, everybody gets a role in the cosmic management of human lifespans. Historians still argue whether this framework comforted people or simply masked fear, but you feel the effect either way. It softens the edge of uncertainty and gives structure to what would otherwise feel random and cruel. You notice funerals are communal events. The entire village or parish gathers, mourning and celebrating simultaneously. You see children learning early how to process absence, how grief integrates into daily life without paralyzing it. A quirky detail. In some areas, corpses were carried in carts past households to warn the living of plague or danger. A literal mobile obituary. You shiver a little at the thought, then fold it into the rhythm of normalcy. Pilgrimages and prayers offer both spiritual and practical benefits. Visiting holy sites sometimes coincides with rest, improved diet, or minor medical care, even if the spiritual motivation dominates. Life expectancy is affected indirectly by these rituals. more by temporary relief than by divine intervention. You roll your eyes a little but respect the practical side. A light joke: pilgrimages are basically medieval wellness retreats, minus the spa. Children grow up observing patterns. Death follows disease, famine, or injury, yet also waits for no one. The unpredictability is constant, yet life continues. This awareness teaches caution, empathy, and adaptability. You internalize it without words. Communities build around faith, offering support for the sick, the elderly, and the vulnerable. Monks provide shelter, nuns feed children, neighbors care for the infirm. Life expectancy rises slightly for those embedded in these networks, showing that social cohesion can stretch survival quietly but meaningfully. Quirky beliefs pepper daily practice. Amulets, relics, and charms accompany prayers, each promising protection from harm. Historians still argue whether such objects offered psychological resilience that translated into actual survival, or if they were purely symbolic. From your perspective, seeing a neighbor clutch a charm while facing illness doesn't seem ridiculous. It seems necessary. You notice personal rituals emerging as well. Washing hands before meals, fasting on certain days, using herbal infusions, practices that mix spiritual intent with practical benefit. This slow layering of behavior shapes bodies as much as belief shapes minds. Sundays and feast days punctuate the calendar, slowing work, offering reflection, and reinforcing moral structures. You learn that a rhythm of rest and reflection, even imposed by faith, subtly preserves health. Life expectancy isn't only numbers. It's the rhythm of days, weeks, and seasons. Finally, death is normalized. You may lose siblings, neighbors, parents, all without drama beyond the immediate sorrow. The omnipresence of mortality teaches acceptance, preparing the young to step into adult responsibilities with resilience. The framing by religion does not prevent death, but it tempers its psychological toll. So you drift through life feeling both fragile and supported, understanding that faith is both a shield and a guide. Mortality remains inevitable, but it is rendered navigable by the rituals and beliefs woven around it, quietly shaping how long people live and how they experience the hours in between. You notice the pattern long before anyone names it. Plagues arrive like tides, reshaping everything in their path. Life expectancy in the Middle Ages is devastated by these periodic catastrophes, far more dramatically than famine or ordinary disease. This is a mainstream historical fact. Outbreaks of plague, especially the Black Death, can wipe out a third or more of a population in a matter of months, resetting the averages and terrifying the living. You hear whispers before the sickness spreads, rumors of a mysterious death that travels from town to town, carried by merchants, rats, or simply the wind. Fear is palpable and it thickens the air. Streets empty, markets close, and people barricade themselves indoors. A light joke drifts in. Social distancing was invented out of sheer terror, long before anyone thought of TikTok trends. Plague doesn't discriminate entirely, but it hits differently depending on age and health. Children, the frail, the malnourished, and the elderly often succumb first. Adults who survive the first wave may carry immunity, though no one understands immunity, so this is seen as luck or divine favor. Historians still argue how much genetic versus environmental factors determine survival, but from your perspective, the pattern is terrifyingly real. Quirky measures emerge to protect the population. People burn herbs, carry fragrant posies, and avoid contact with neighbors. Some flee to countryside cottages, believing fresh air is a cure. Others rely on charms, holy water, or lucky rituals. Whether these practices help is debated endlessly, but they shape behavior in ways that indirectly affect survival. The social consequences are massive. Labor shortages suddenly make your work more valuable. Wages can rise if you survive, and those who endure often acquire property once owned by the deceased. Life expectancy averages spike for survivors simply because the population has been culled by the disease, a cruel arithmetic that skews statistics for generations. You notice fear and hope intertwining. Every cough or rash sets nerves jangling. Yet communities adapt. Quarantine measures, simple though they are, slow disease spread. Houses with space isolate the sick. Families with foresight store food. These small adaptations, born of necessity, stretch lives for those who manage them. There's also psychological endurance at play. Watching neighbors die teaches caution, patience, and careful observation. You internalize these lessons, sometimes unconsciously, giving you a subtle edge over those less attentive. Historians still argue whether cultural memory of plague shaped long-term resilience, or if survival was mostly luck. A sleepy, quirky observation. Some families flee cities only to discover that the countryside isn't immune to disease. It just moves slower. Life expectancy shifts as mobility changes, not biology alone. It's an early lesson in how environment, behavior, and chance intertwine. Despite terror, life continues. You attend burials, help tend the sick, and return to work. Each day survived is a small triumph. The averages may look grim, but individual experience is uneven. A neighbor dies, another thrives. You learn that statistics describe the crowd, but not you personally. By the end of an outbreak, your village or town is transformed. Some houses stand empty. Some people are richer, some wiser. And somewhere in the midst of the devastation, you, breathing, walking, thinking, exist as proof of resilience. Life expectancy isn't a promise. It's a shifting measure, battered by epidemics, but carried forward by adaptation, community, and sheer stubborn survival. You notice that very few people around you live into what we now think of as old age, and when someone does, it feels almost miraculous. Seeing an elder in the village is like spotting a rare bird, a human who has endured decades of disease, labor, famine, and conflict. This is the mainstream fact. True old age was uncommon in the Middle Ages, but it did exist, and those who reached it became living symbols of endurance. Elders move differently. Their hands are gnarled, their spines curved, their eyes often cloudy, but their minds are sharp. They remember seasons, wars, plagues, and harvests long past. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some communities believed that very old people carried fragments of magic, that wisdom and survival somehow blended into an aura that could protect or advise the living. Historians still argue whether these beliefs genuinely shaped behavior or were purely symbolic. But from your perspective, elders hold authority that almost nothing else can grant. Old age is often functional rather than leisurely. You may live long, but that doesn't mean you escape work. Even elders continue to contribute, offering guidance, childcare, or knowledge of herbs and remedies. Their survival matters to the household and community. You notice how younger people defer to them not out of fear, but out of respect for the decades etched into every wrinkle and calloused hand. Life expectancy numbers flatten this reality into averages, making it seem as if people rarely survived beyond 30 or 40. But this obscures the truth. Those who made it past the hazards of childhood, disease, and labor could sometimes enjoy decades of experience. A light joke drifts in. Consider old age a medieval bonus level, hard to reach, rewarding in ways the game manual never explains. Nutrition, work, and genetics conspire here. Elders often had slightly better diets, avoided fatal accidents by instinct, and sometimes inherited robust constitutions. Their bodies tell stories of adaptation. Scars from childhood illness, where from decades of work, resilience from surviving plague or famine. You watch them teach without lecturing. They correct mistakes gently, using memory and example rather than punishment. Wisdom is embodied, not abstract. And in their presence, you feel the strange sense that longevity is not just about surviving. It's about living fully enough to witness the slow unfolding of time. Quirky beliefs persist. Some elders are consulted for charms, remedies, or advice on avoiding disease. They become cultural anchors, connecting past, present, and future in ways that can literally save lives. Historians still argue how much longevity influenced social hierarchy, but from inside the village it feels intuitive. Surviving gives authority, and authority often saves others. Old age is fragile, too. Injury, malnutrition, or new disease can undo decades of survival instantly. Yet elders who endure are remarkably resilient. Their presence reassures the community that life can stretch beyond the average, that longevity is possible even in a world shaped by scarcity and danger. You notice how rare and precious these lives are, and it subtly shifts how the living plan, behave, and hope. Elders are mentors, guardians, and storytellers. They carry history forward, and in doing so, they subtly reshape the life expectancy of those around them. Not through numbers, but through knowledge, skill, and caution. So you start to understand longevity as a complex weave. Survival through childhood, avoidance of accidents, adaptation to work, nutrition, and social networks, all blending together to produce rare but real examples of extended life. And those examples are treasured, studied, and remembered as beacons of possibility in a fragile world. You step back and realize that life expectancy isn't just a measure of years. It's a mosaic of experience, shaped by countless small factors that rarely get counted. Every decision, every accident avoided, every meal eaten, every day survived in a plague or famine adds to the unseen ledger of your existence. This is the mainstream truth historians emphasize. Longevity is probabilistic, not guaranteed, and heavily influenced by environment, behavior, and luck. Daily habits ripple outward. Washing hands with cold water, avoiding spoiled food, carrying water from a clean well. Each small act stacks incrementally in your favor. You notice that these behaviors often arise instinctively, rather than from conscious understanding of disease. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believe that wearing a fox's tail or rabbit's foot wards off illness. Effectively useless biologically, perhaps, but psychologically comforting. Historians still argue how much behavioral superstitions like these actually improve survival rates versus merely giving a sense of control. Seasons structure life in profound ways. Winters are the hardest, cold, wet, food scarce. Summers bring growth and abundance. You learn to pace yourself with the rhythm of nature. Work, rest, and meals align with light and temperature. The medieval year feels cyclical, and life expectancy stretches or shrinks in harmony with it. You laugh softly. Modern planners would call this seasonal risk management, but here it's just life. Social networks act as safety nets. Families, neighbors, and guilds monitor each other. Orphan children are absorbed into extended households. Elders advise, healers treat, and the community shares burdens. You realize that life expectancy here isn't only about biology. It's about interdependence. The stronger the network, the higher the chances of survival. A light joke drifts in. Basically, everyone is your LinkedIn, but with swords and soup. Quirky customs pop up everywhere. Certain foods, rituals, or protective charms are believed to ward off misfortune. Even if their medical effectiveness is minimal, their psychological effect matters. Feeling protected reduces stress, encourages attention to daily tasks, and subtly increases survival odds. Historians still debate the practical versus symbolic value of these rituals. You notice trade-offs everywhere. High-status individuals may enjoy comfort but risk political intrigue or sedentary ailments. Poor villagers labor endlessly but sometimes gain resilience and immunity. Children survive or die largely based on parental care, nutrition, and early exposure. Life expectancy emerges not as a single number, but as a delicate equilibrium of countless variables. Education, knowledge, and memory shape outcomes. Knowing which herbs soothe fevers, which wells are clean, how to detect early signs of illness. All these skills quietly lengthen lives. Elders become walking repositories of life-extending strategies. Observing and learning from them is essential. You chuckle quietly. Medieval life hacks are not optional. They're survival tools. Even accidents are probabilistic. Falling from a roof, tripping on uneven cobbles, or being bitten by a horse. Random events shape statistics as much as chronic risks. You realize that luck isn't just superstition here, it's survival. And every day you remain upright, breathing, and aware, you're stacking small victories that modern averages can't fully capture. Finally, mortality itself is a teacher. By observing it constantly, through neighbors, family, strangers, you internalize caution, resilience, and humility. Life expectancy isn't a fixed horizon. It's a lived process, felt as a series of choices, exposures, and small attentions to the rhythm of daily life. And in this realization, you start to appreciate the complexity behind every breath, every step, every task. You reach the final stretch of your medieval journey, and a strange calm settles over you. By now, you've seen the invisible threads that weave life expectancy into daily existence. Childhood hazards, nutrition, labor, disease, class, faith, and luck. You notice how all these factors intertwine, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently, shaping who lives, who dies, and who becomes an elder remembered long after. This is the mainstream truth. Life expectancy is never just a number. It is a lived, felt, communal experience. By this stage, you've internalized rhythm. Seasons, festivals, work cycles, prayers, and communal rituals dictate your daily motion. Life expectancy becomes less abstract. It is measured by milestones, not digits. You note birthdays through events, not calendars. Remembering that survival past each year feels like a quiet triumph. A light joke floats by. Nobody is sending you a cake, but at least you survived another winter. Disease, famine, and war still hover, but now you carry knowledge and experience like armor. You know which waters to drink, which herbs soothe, which neighbors are safest to approach. Quirky protective charms, once dismissed, now feel like ritualized mindfulness. A psychological buffer that slightly tilts the odds in your favor. Historians still argue how much superstition genuinely contributed to survival versus comfort, but from where you stand, every edge counts. Community remains crucial. Elders advise, midwives guide, neighbors share, guilds protect. Social networks are the hidden scaffolding of longevity. Survival is never solitary. You watch how those networks absorb shocks, plague, famine, conflict, and subtly prolong life for the prepared, the observant, the lucky. A gentle joke drifts in. Think of it as medieval social insurance without the paperwork, premiums, or actuaries. You feel the weight and the wonder of old age. Few around you have reached it, yet those who have embody resilience, memory, and authority. Their stories ripple through generations, teaching survival not through instruction, but example. Quirky customs, repeated over decades, embed knowledge into behavior, which plants heal, which rituals calm, which actions prevent accidents. Historians still debate whether these cultural memories extended life expectancy measurably or simply offered guidance, but their presence is undeniable. Even the harshest aspects, work, hunger, disease, acquire context over time. They are no longer surprises but parameters of life you navigate with practiced care. Life expectancy is a living tapestry, continually rewoven by experience, observation, and adaptation. You understand that surviving isn't just a matter of body. It is also about knowledge, relationships, and the subtle art of persistence. You carry forward the lessons of centuries compressed into daily living. Pay attention to your body, honor cycles of work and rest, heed communal wisdom, and never underestimate the quiet power of preparation. In this way, longevity becomes not just the extension of years, but the cultivation of lived experience, awareness, and adaptability. As night deepens, you feel the profound simplicity of existence in the Middle Ages. Precarious yet rich, harsh yet tender, fragile yet resilient. Life expectancy isn't a statistic. It's the rhythm of breathing, the pulse of daily work, the cycle of seasons, the strength of relationships, and the courage to face uncertainty again each morning. You lie back, feeling the weight of survival, the whispers of history, and the quiet wonder of simply being alive. Equals 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 equals. Now, as you settle into the soft embrace of night, let your body and mind begin to slow. Imagine the wind brushing over fields you've walked, carrying the scent of distant fires and damp earth, of herbs drying in the sun, and the faint warmth of a hearth that never goes out. The world of the Middle Ages recedes gently, leaving only the echoes of laughter, work, prayers, and whispered secrets. Every struggle you've imagined, the cold, the hunger, the fever, the sudden crises, softens into a rhythm you can almost follow with your breathing. Feel the steady pulse of life that continued despite all odds, and let it remind you that resilience was never rare. It was the quiet expectation of every day. Children played, elders taught, farmers labored, and villagers cared for one another, each action silently extending life in ways numbers can't capture. Even superstition, ritual, and charm held a subtle purpose, guiding behavior, focusing attention, and sometimes tipping the scales ever so slightly towards survival. Imagine walking through narrow streets or wide fields, the smell of bread, smoke, and fresh rain grounding you in that world while the stress and danger fade like morning mist. The lessons settle in your mind. Notice patterns, respect cycles, value community, observe quietly, and understand that each day survived is a small triumph. Let these thoughts wrap around you like a soft blanket. Remember the elders, the midwives, the laborers, the children, everyone who endured and contributed to the fabric of life, whose existence quietly reshaped what was possible. Let their endurance remind you of your own capacity to adapt, to learn, and to survive in your own time. Slow your breathing, feel the calm, and let the images fade gently into your dreams. Tonight, you travel through centuries in the safety of imagination, witnessing lives stretched, challenged, and cherished. Life expectancy may have been unpredictable, but human persistence, wisdom, and care created continuity that echoes quietly across generations. Let that echo lull you toward rest.